This rare photograph was taken in the western Finnish city of Tampere in April 1868, where a kind British or English, either middle class man or aristocrat, had brought some bread to feed hungry people, especially children. The last official Finnish famine began, depending on how it's interpreted, either in 1866 or in 1867. Already the summer of 1866 was extremely rainy in Finland, and potatoes and root vegetables rotted in the fields, and conditions for sowing grain in the autumn were unfavorable. When stored food ran out, thousands took to the roads to beg. The winter of 1866 to 1867 was extremely long and cold. It ended even in southernmost Finland only in late May, and the average temperature in Helsinki for May 1867 was plus 1.8 degrees, about 8 degrees Celsius below the long-time average, and by far the coldest such month in the Finnish meteorological record, which in Helsinki stretches until the late 1820s. In many places, lakes and rivers remained frozen until June. The Midsummer Day week in late June was tropically warm in many parts of southern and central Finland, with temperatures of even over plus 30 degrees being mentioned or being measured, but already in or around mid-July, Finland began to experience rainy and cool weather, and during the first week of September 1867, almost the entire Finland was hit by several frosty nights that ravaged crops. As a result, harvest was only between 40 and 50% of the average, and already by the autumn of 1867 people were dying by the thousands. The government of the Finnish Grand Duchy was ill-equipped to handle a crisis of such magnitude. There was no money readily available to import food, and the government was slow to recognize the severity of the situation. Only in September 1867, when it was clear that Finland had a massive crop failure, did the Finnish finance minister Johan Snellman appeal abroad for food aid, and he was able to get a loan from a German banker, Mr. Rothschild, but because the new winter began already in October and even the Finnish southern coast froze in November 1867, only a small fraction of this grain arrived to Finland, which made the famine even more severe. During the 3 years 1866, 1867, and 1868, about 270,000 Finns, or about 1/7 of that time's population, died, with 138,000 people dying in the year 1868 alone. It was difficult to transport what little aid could be mustered in Finland, which still was very sparsely populated. Its population was no higher than about 1.7 million people. A number of emergency public works projects were set up, foremost among them being the construction of the railway line from Riihimäki to St. Petersburg, which on the Finnish side was only the second railway line. The weather returned to normal in the spring of 1868, and that year's harvest was somewhat better than average, but contagious diseases that had spread in the previous year took many additional lives. Programs were launched to increase the diversity of the Finnish agriculture, and rapidly improving communications made a recurrence of such a famine less likely. Since there have been 2 times when Finland has faced near famine, from 1917 to 1918 because of the shortages of food caused by the First World War and the virtual lack of foreign trade, and then the bloody, albeit brief, Finnish Civil War, and then the extremely cold war winter of 1941 to 1942. The Finnish people in general saw the famine as an act or a punishment of God, Few would have expected the crown to be able to do much more, and blame was directed mainly at local officials. No significant working class political movement had developed yet that could have capitalized politically on the crisis. The urban population was small, and for the people of the countryside, the first priority was to resume normal lives. In short, the famine did not threaten the social order, but its memory cast a long shadow, and for decades afterward, Finnish elderly people admonished, especially children, to eat all the food that was put in front of them, especially all the bread, because they called it God's grain. After the famine, Finland began to focus on dairy industry in its agriculture and began to import food from Russia, although the ditching system of Finnish farmed fields was significantly developed.